In a rather potentially surprising or maybe unsurprising announcement, Eric Schmidt, the AG from Missouri, says in a stunning development, our office has learned that every single one of the St. Louis looters and rioters arrested were released back onto the streets by local prosecutor Kim Gardner. This has very, very serious implications. We have seen many jurisdictions release prisoners over COVID fears. So consider this kind of an addendum to my main segment video. If you haven't seen it, go to timcast.net. It was up at 4 p.m. where I talk about Democrat policies. Their hypocrisy is exposed, essentially. They've betrayed the people, supporting protests, ignoring the coronavirus, the lockdown. What is even going on at this point? How can we know who to trust and what is real? That's the serious question. But more importantly, in this regard, we have all of these people released from jails. This video you posted was an active shootout in St. Louis. It is horrifying video. Haunting. Well, I can't play the video for you because this is YouTube, and I want to make sure you actually get to hear what I have to say, so I can show you this. From the AP today. 4 St. Louis police officers shot. Ex-captain killed during unrest. Right now, there is a major fundraiser for a retired police captain named David Dorn, who lost his life protecting a shop from looters. He was killed. How many people are going to speak up about him? This is the aftermath of those that want the rioting. But I do want to make sure we stay in line with what's happening with the policies of not only Democrats. In fact, many Republican jurisdictions released prisoners too, but it is mostly the Democrat areas that thought it was necessary to release people, violent offenders, because they were concerned about spreading COVID in prisons. To be fair as well, I think there is a legitimate question about the constitutionality of locking someone in some place that might become infected with a pandemic, because as we even learned from the studies, the lockdown was a bad idea. It does seem all a bit contradictory that they would tell everyone to lock down, but then argue that the prisons were a bad place because they could get infected. It's like, well, you're telling everyone to go indoors and huddle next to each other. It doesn't make sense. Here's what happened in St. Louis, and then I got another story for you. Protests that began peacefully over the death of George Floyd turned violent in the St. Louis area, where 4 police officers were shot and wounded, and a retired St. Louis police captain was killed by looters at a pawn shop. Actions the governor blamed on criminals and thugs. St. Louis police on Tuesday said 77-year-old David Dorn, who retired in 2007 after 38 years with the department, was fatally shot during a break-in at a pawn shop. Several thousand people joined the demonstrations in St. Louis over Floyd's death and police treatment of African Americans on Monday. But that night and into Tuesday morning, a downtown convenience store was burned. Windows were smashed. More than 60 businesses were burglarized, and officers were pelted with rocks and fireworks. The burglarized businesses include 17 cell phone stores, 9 beauty supply stores, 8 cash or pawn shops, and 3 Foot Lockers, according to a preliminary list from police. There were also 7 property damage reports, 2 ATMs, car dealerships, even a church. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch reports. Republican Missouri Governor Mike Parson said he was deploying more than 1,000 National Guard troops in response to the crimes and attacks in St. Louis that he said had nothing to do with protesting. No, they're not protesters, said Parson, a Republican and former sheriff. They're criminals and they're thugs, and they need to be held accountable, and hopefully they'll get hunted down. Meanwhile, St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson announced a 9 p.m. curfew. What started as a very nonviolent and peaceful demonstration and protest ended in looting, shooting, burning, and attacks on law enforcement, she said. This cannot be and will not be tolerated. Just after midnight, with only a couple hundred people still on the streets, someone opened fire on officers standing in line. Police Chief John Hayden said 2 officers were struck in the leg. 1 was hit in the foot and 1 in the arm. All 4 are expected to recover. Hayden choked back tears as he expressed thanks. They weren't more seriously hurt. He said, some coward fired shots at officer, and now we have 4 in the hospital, but thankfully, thank God they're alive. They're alive. Can we make some sense out of this? That's all I'm trying to say. They say no one has been arrested in that shooting. I want to make sure that point is clear because I'm showing you these 2 stories and the importance of them. We don't know who did the shooting. We know that in Louisville, the police and law enforcement said that a crowd shot at them. They shot back. And apparently some local barbecue chef lost his life. And it saddens me to hear this too. They were just trying to clear something out. Why would someone start shooting at these cops? Why would someone shoot this man, David Dorn, over some TVs? It's amazing how little they value human life, whoever these people are. It's amazing. I'm reminded of the quote from the movie Watchmen. Dr. Manhattan. Maybe you're familiar with it, where he's talking to his former love interest. And he explains that, for those that aren't familiar with the comic, Dr. Manhattan basically can see the world. He's essentially a god in many ways. And he doesn't really value existence or life until he sees the past of the woman who was with for a while. And he sees that it was a lifetime of random, unique experiences that, against all of the odds, all of these insane moments come together to create this one person. And that in and of itself is a miracle. Long story short, a human being cannot be replaced. A human being is entirely unique in all of their experiences, their thoughts and their ideas. Now, sure, if you zoom out far enough, people look the same, little dots moving around. You zoom in a little bit more and you'll see they look kind of different. But for the most part, a lot of similar things. We eat, we sleep, we grow tired, we grow old, we age. But when you come down to it and actually talk to a person, you'll find that they're completely unique in very specific ways. It's like a literal snowflake. The reason I bring this up is it's shocking to me that this retired cop, David Dorn, would lose his life over something as stupid as a TV, of which there are so many. I walk into my local Best Buy, before the pandemic, mind you, and they couldn't do anything to get rid of them. There were too many. All the same, lined up, box by box. Who cares? Man, if you want a couple $100 and you're willing to snuff out a unique individual's existence, then you are truly, truly a monster. But this brings me back to the main point. What are the possibilities? The people who did this were released from the jails. I think the possibility exists. I can't speculate as to how high the probability is. But Eric Schmidt, he describes himself as a husband to Jamie, father to Stephen, Sophia, and Olivia, Missouri's attorney general. He said, in a stunning development, our office has learned, this came out this morning, every single one of the looters and rioters were released back onto the streets by local prosecutor. We don't know if these people are involved in the shooting of these cops on the front line or in the shooting of David Dorn. But I think it's possible. And I think we've already seen if they're committing any crimes at all, this was clearly a mistake. When somebody goes to prison, I don't like the idea of innocent people going to prison, and too many do. But when you're convicted by a jury of your peers in a system that we try to make it the best, even though it's far from perfect and we've developed really, really awful practices, we seriously need hard criminal justice reform. But the point is, when you're convicted, the idea is that you are being put away not just for rehabilitation, which I don't think they actually do. That's one of the points they try to claim, but to just take you out of society because you cause problems. You hurt people. You forfeit your freedom of movement when you commit violent acts and criminal acts against other people. So to release them out of a fear of coronavirus perhaps was a big mistake, because now they are taking advantage once again. Now they're out in the streets, not social distancing or abiding by any of these coronavirus pandemic lockdown orders. And many of them are looting and rioting. And here's the story. This is back. What's the date on this one? March 31st. Missouri AG concerned about inmates released due to COVID-19 concerns. Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt said violent offenders were released and their victims were not notified. Man, you could see it coming. This guy was warning. It's five on your side. That's what they say. KSDK. What is this? Local news? A man who fired a shot at a cab driver during a robbery. A man accused of assaulting a woman. A man who robbed a restaurant and pointed a gun at an employee. A man who shot another man. A man who left the scene of a fatal accident. These are the types of inmates who Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt said have been released from the St. Louis jail in an effort to reduce the population due to coronavirus outbreak concerns. I don't know what to tell you, man. They told us all to shut our businesses down, give up our lives. And then when these protests started, they said, here, here, good job, all protesters. They did. Just don't riot. That's what they said. You know what? You want to gather in large groups? That's fine. I mean, we banned large groups, but that's fine. We're also going to release all the prisoners. Those prisoners are going to loot and destroy your businesses. It's a perfect storm of ineptitude. I cannot believe it. How miserably these Democrats across the country have failed. Absolutely. I can't believe it. Prisoners released, and everyone could see something like this as an inevitability. Their victims were not notified of their release, according to a letter from Schmidt sent to Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. In the letter, Schmidt writes that he is charged with enforcing the state's sunshine laws and finds Gardner's refusal to make the identities of the released inmates public particularly troubling. Gardner responded with a letter of her own and said there were no complaints about her violating the state's public records law and accused Schmidt of repeating inaccuracies contained in local media reports on the issue, as well as playing politics. Schmidt is a Republican and Gardner is a Democrat. And there it is. It's tribalism for sure. And so take what Schmidt is saying is with a grain of salt. But I mean, he's the AG. You know, if he's saying it, they got a sunshine law in Missouri. The Democrat released these people. The Democrats mostly supported these protests. And the people that got released started looting and rioting. What more can be said? I guess it's something most of you probably expected would have happened. Well, there you go. I got a couple more segments coming up for you in a few minutes, and I'll see you all shortly.